that have you ever known somebody that has passed away? That's like as you sit back and you thought over their life, and it's like you thought over all the memories of that person's life. That's like, could you ever? That's like that's like all you could think about was, man, that person really lives, or that person really lived life to the fullest, or that person lived a life that was full of passion and a life that was full of commitment. When I think about this, I often think about my great-grandmother, and so I tell my kids all about her. But it's like she was born in 1892 or 1893. I can't remember exactly which year. But she was born on Love Mountain in that's in Love, Virginia. And it's like my family comes off of Love Mountain. And it's like she was a Henderson off of Love, and she married a Campbell off of Campbell's Mountain. But she lived to be 101 years old. And it's like, man, all the stories she could tell. All these stories that like kids nowadays wouldn't believe. These stories seem too crazy, and these stories seem too far-fetched for kids today that's like to probably even believe. She used to tell me stories about riding into town on a horse and buggy going to go pick up her wedding dress. It's like a Waynesboro. That's like I remember the time she told me about the first time that she ever seen a car. She was like 16 the first time she ever seen a car. That's like she told stories about delivering her own babies. And I've told Andrew a story about her cutting wood. And it's like she went into labor and delivered her own baby on a wood pile. But it's like she also told sad stories that they're about having to bury her own babies at time. Because see, you have to remember, this here was a time when there were no doctors, there were no hospitals, there were no funeral homes to go to. This here was a different time in a different world. My great grandmother was a straight up tough old mountain woman. There's no other way to put it. But yet at the same time, she was also one of the most loving, one of the most sweetest Christian souls that you would ever find. And so here's a funny story about her that actually involves me. Back when I was a kid, which they would have put her around her early to her mid-90s, she used to get Meals on Wheels delivered to her house. Well, what they used to say, she was too stubborn and too stuck in her ways to eat these Meals on Wheels, so that she would always save them for me. And so my great-grandma would always even up into her late 90s, she would always cook her own meals on an old cooked wood stove. Now, let's think about this. We're talking about the mid to late 1980s, and she was still cooking on a wood stove. Even up until the age of about 95. Well, just like I said, she would always save her Meals on Wheels dinners for me to eat. That's like we would visit her house every Monday night growing up, and it's like we say that on Monday nights I would eat pretty good. Well, actually not really. Because see, remember, this was Meals on Wheels, 1980 style. All this was a straight up TV dinner, which was wrapped in an aluminum foil container that had like a little piece of Salisbury steak, some hard, weird mashed potatoes, and some like peas, corn, and some carrots mixed up in another little compartment. But it's like needless to say, she would save all these Meals on Wheels dinners for her favorite great-grandson in the world. Now, here's where I say this story gets funny. Well, these meals that they would deliver to her would come with those cartons of milk like you did at school. But the problem was she was 90-some years old, and she couldn't read the expiration dates on the milk cartons anymore. Well, to make a long story short, with it needless to say, I had to learn the hard way to always check the expiration date on the cartons of milk in my grandma's refrigerator, because I had taken many drinks of sour milk in her house. And it's like I also tell my kids that like she couldn't see real well, and she used to have ants in her ice cubes. So it's just some funny little stories that like, I look back at now, and it's like I don't know, they just bring me comfort. It's weird. But it's like I often think about getting to meet her one day again in heaven. Most people think about as they're the people that they can't wait to see again when they get to, well, that's like when they get to heaven someday. And it's like for me, it is her. That's the person that I long to get to reunite with. That's like to get to see once again. It's like I only bring this up because this week we are finishing up our series on the life of the prophet Elisha. That's it. We have gone through his entire life up until this point. And it's like, all I can say is what a life this man lived. This man lived a full life. That's like this week we have reached the end of his life. And see, we're going to read the story of his death. And if you think he lived an interesting life, and if you think he did some crazy things in his life, just wait until you read about his death here in a second. Wait until you see what he does even after he dies. And so turn with me in your Bibles to the book of 2 Kings once again, and it'll be on page 312 in the Pew Bibles. But the book of 2 Kings, chapter 13. We'll be reading verses 14 through verse 21, page 312, 2 Kings, chapter 13, verses 14 through verse 21. It's just that Elisha had become sick with the illness of which he would die. Then Joash, the king of Israel, came down to him. It's like he wept over his face, and he says, "Oh, my father, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen." Just to take a brief second, that was the exact same statement that the prophet Elisha had said when the prophet Elijah was taken into heaven. So it's kind of a little bit of irony here. This is what the king is saying to Elisha as he himself is now getting ready to die. That's like Elisha says to him, "Take a bow and take some arrows." So he took himself a bow and some arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, Put your hand on the bow." So he put his hand on it. And Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. And he said, "Open the east window." And he opened it. And then Elisha said, "Shoot." And he shot. And he said that the arrow of the Lord's deliverance and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. So forward you must strike the Syrians at Aphek till you have destroyed them. Then he said, "Take the arrows." So he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground. So he struck the ground 3 times, and then he stopped. And the man of God became angry with him and said, "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then he would have struck Syria till you had destroyed it. But now you will only strike Syria only 3 times." Then Elisha dies, and they buried him. So we think this is the end of his life, but it's not. And the raiding band of Moab invaded the land in the spring of the year. So it was, as they were burying a man, that suddenly they spied a band of raiders, and they put the man in the tomb of Elisha. And it's when the man was let down and touched the bones of Elisha, it says that he revived and stood on his feet. So here we go again. We got one last crazy story with the prophet Elisha. This is maybe the craziest and the strangest of them all. Here we have Elisha. He is laying on his deathbed, and the king of Israel comes to pay his homage to the great prophet. It's like Elisha does something kind of strange. It's like Elisha does something kind of a father would do to a son. I can remember when I was learning to shoot a gun, my dad kind of holding the gun for me too as I'm shooting it. But you see, Elisha tells the king would have put a bow in his hands. That's like they hold the bow together, and as they shoot this arrow together, kind of as a father would hold a son's hand. And it's when the arrow had landed, we see that Elisha says that the victory will be Israel. We see that he proclaimed the victory of Israel over Syria. Now, if you was to read the history of the real Robin Hood, you would kind of see the same thing told at his death. You will see, or like supposedly, Robin Hood shot an arrow out of his window with the help of his servant, and it's wherever the arrow landed was where he was to be buried. I actually watched the whole documentary on them trying to find the gravesite of Robin Hood. That's the only reason why I know that weird little piece of information. So that there's kind of the same ending is kind of different. That's me personally. I think it's the historians of like Robin Hood read the story of Elisha and kind of built that up because it's too much of a coincidence. But what's funny is that after they shot this arrow, and it's after Elisha declared victory, we see that he told the king to strike the ground with the arrows. That's kind of a weird thing, but it's nonetheless, he tells the king to strike the ground with the arrows. And it's like evidently Elisha, he didn't like the king's attitude when he struck the ground, and he becomes angry with him. Now, we don't really know why he becomes angry. But as Elisha said, he should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. That's it, because he only did 3 times. Now the Lord is only going to give him three victories over Syria, and then they were going to have to keep on fighting them. And that's it. All of this is because that Elisha thought that the king showed a lack of enthusiasm, and because of this, they would only get to experience a partial victory and not a complete one. There actually is a life lesson there's in all of that. And it's like that life lesson is to be careful, and it's like always give 100% to God. Always give your all to God. Always give your best to God, because God doesn't like half-hearted people. God doesn't like half-committed people. Or it's like we said back in the first week of the series, you cannot give God slop and expect blessings in return. Or you cannot do a poor job at your work. That's like expect your boss to give you a raise. So that's kind of the lesson we're seeing played over again here. But the story doesn't end there. This story gets even better. We see that the prophet Elisha dies, and it's months later, in the spring of the year, something crazy happens. And it's that I love the detail that the Bible has. The Bible even says that this is the bones of Elijah. This is the bones of Elisha. So he's been dead for a while now. And it's like evidently there's some kind of a little skirmish or some kind of a little war that is taking place. And it's like some men are trying to bury one of their dead. And as they're trying to bury one of their dead, they look off in the horizon and I think they see their enemy coming. And so then they have to dispose of their friend's body in a pretty quick way. So then they just throw him into the grave of Elisha. Now, to be truthful, just again, in the heat of the moment, I seriously doubt these men knew that this was the tomb of the prophet Elisha. They probably just seen a tomb and decided, let's just throw him in here real quick because our enemies are coming. But it's when they threw their dead friend's body into the tomb of Elisha, we just read where the man came back to life, and it says that the man got up and he stood up on his feet. Once again, I love the detail that the Bible writers have. It says that he stood up on his feet. And it's interesting, that's where the story ends. We don't get any more detail. The prophet Elisha is never mentioned again, but this is where the story ends. It's like we don't even get to hear what happens about this man who was raised back to life. But this story is a beautiful picture of living a life that leaves a lasting legacy that is even after we are long gone and dead. We see that the life of Elisha is a beautiful picture of living a life where your legacy will carry on long after you are gone. And it's like, also, this story is a beautiful picture of us here to today. That's like us having a second chance or a second life through the death and the burial and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This here is an Old Testament foreshadow of second life through the death, burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So like you've heard me say it again, trying to show me where the Old Testament does not point to Jesus Christ. He is all over the pages of the Old Testament. So so even in the death of Elisha, we see where even in his death, he's doing these wild and it's like these crazy things. But it's whether it was burning clouds we talked about, or if it's following Elijah with full commitment, or if it's making axe heads float, bears eating kids, healing lepers. We didn't talk about the story where Elisha healed a leper. That's either he was making tainted water clean. We learned back in weeks ago where he made tainted water clean. Whether it was shooting arrows, raising the dead back to life, or even raising the dead back to life, even after he himself was dead, you can easily say that the prophet Elisha is one of the most memorable people that's in all of the Bible. I mean, think about all the stuff that we have read. I mean, burning plows, making axe heads float, bears eating people, healing lepers. It's just wild, crazy stuff. He is one of the most memorable people that's in the entire Bible. We talked about this back in week 1, but there is actually a lot of comparisons between the miracles of Elisha and the miracles of Jesus. Jesus turned water into wine. Don't we see where Elisha turned dirty water into he turned dirty water into clean water. We see where Jesus healed the lepers. We see where the prophet Elisha he healed the lepers. Both of them raised people from the dead. So there's a lot of comparisons between the miracles of the prophet but the prophet Elisha in the miracles of Christ. And it's like I keep referring back to our first week in the series here this morning, simply because like in any great series of movies, you always see how the last one always gets thrown back to the first. All great movie series, we see where the last one always reverts back to the first. It's like it's time so I keep referring back to our first week in the series. And if you had to sum up the entire life of Elisha, that's like in just one word. Once again, it would go back to our very first week in this series. You can sum up the entire life of Elisha with just one word. And that one word would be commitment. Well, actually, maybe you can sum his life up in 2 words. Just like those 2 words would be a ridiculous commitment. He lived a life of ridiculous commitment. That's like it seemed that he let nothing or it's nobody knock him off his track. Even death itself could not stop his legacy. His legacy kept going on even after he had died. That's like not only did he raise a dead person back to life, but he raised a dead person back to life after he himself was dead. That's like also thousands of years later, we are right here this morning. We are reading as we are learning about this man's life. So here's my challenge for us today. Here's my challenge to sort of bring this series to a closure and sort of bring it all back. So here's my challenge for us today as a people, also as a church. My challenge is, it's time for us to start getting ridiculous like the prophet Elijah, the prophet Elisha. It's time for us to stop holding back. It's time for us to start taking risks. It's like to start making the decisions that this world might not understand. That's like the world might think that we're crazy. But that's okay there, because the world doesn't understand faith anyway. The world isn't going to get us. That's okay. It's time for us to stop stopping and stop quitting just just because others around us are. It's time for us to start living a life that is committed. Maybe that's in your church. Maybe that's in your family. Maybe that's in your job place. But it's time for us to finally commit to the call of God on our lives as the church. It's time for us to start. Because see, the truth is, our families need us as the church, as to finally start stepping up. It's time for the church to stop having a 50% divorce rate within its own walls. It's time for the church to stop having single home families. It's like our jobs need us to start stepping up. Our workforces need Christian employees. It's like our workforces need Christian bosses. It's like our companies need Christian CEOs. It's like our churches themselves need for us, the church itself, to actually start stepping up. See, because there are way too many people sitting in church pews today. I include pastors. There are way too many church members, and there are way too many pastors today that are offering God slop. I'm sorry to be so blunt this morning, but it is so true. Our world needs for us, the church, the ones who are called to be the salt and the light of this world. It's time for the church to step up now, maybe more than ever. We need to start getting ridiculous. We need to start living a life like the prophet Elisha. Because the life of Elisha is a perfect picture. His life is a perfect example of what life can actually look like. Like when we decide to let go, it's like to start living ridiculous, to finally hand over all of our stuff to God. It's like to let Him start guiding our lives, our jobs, and our churches. Let us pray. Dear Father, we do just give you so much thanks for the past 7 weeks where we was able to read and to learn about the ridiculous life of the prophet Elisha. Lord, all the wild and all the crazy stuff he done, Lord, we just thank you that we can read about these, and as we can learn about these things, and as we can challenge our own selves, Lord, to live a life like his, God, because the truth is that his life is a perfect example of what life can look like when we decide to follow your calling on our life. So God, we just give you thanks for that. Lord, I want to pray for all the hearts of the people here, that if there's anybody that is sitting here today that is struggling with a call on their life, I pray that you'll just soften their heart this morning, and Lord, I pray that they'll reach out to you. And God, if there's anybody that doesn't know your son Jesus this morning, and if they're pondering and if they're wondering about him, Lord, I pray that they will turn to him this morning and they will ask for guidance. And Lord, we just love you so much this morning. Lord, we just give you all thanks this morning. Lord, we just pray all this in and through the name of your son, Jesus.